Israel has claimed to have unearthed an operational command centre with weapons, combat gear and technological equipment at the Al-Shifa hospital. That's the biggest hospital in Gaza. This after IDF troops entered the complex yesterday. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has faced a Labour rebellion after 10 frontbenchers backed a Gaza ceasefire, along with a total of 56 Labour MPs, in defiance of the Labour leadership's position. Well, author Douglas Murray has been in Gaza with the Israeli Defence Forces as they got close to that Al-Shifa hospital. I'm delighted to say he's back out of Gaza, safe and well back in Israel, and joins us right now. Good morning to you, Douglas.
Good morning. Good to be with you and your viewers,
Thank you very much
Julia.
for joining us. Well, we had hoped to speak to you on the show yesterday, and you got the call along with just a very few journalists who were invited to join Israeli Defence Forces to travel into Gaza, to use some of the routes that those Hamas terrorists used on October the 7th to get in, to slaughter innocent civilians and then take hostages back out. You got pretty close to the place that's being talked about the most right now, the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. Just tell us a little bit, give us some ideas, some picture of what that experience was like.
Well, of course, it's very interesting and quite remarkable to be getting the opportunity to go back through the fence the way that the terrorists came on October the 7th. It's been almost impossible for journalists to get into Gaza since operations began, certainly for Western journalists. And there's an enormous amount of activity going on all the time. It's of all the different fronts in this war, the bit of Gaza we were going into yesterday that we stayed in is one of the main centers of the fighting, and you can see that everywhere. The minute you get past the fence, you can see the villages. There's one place called Zaytun where there's very considerable firefights, explosions. Obviously, house-to-house fighting has been going on since the beginning of this. We went about 3 kilometers further into Gaza from there, but I think you can see at the moment a tunnel that the IDF had discovered, part of the Hamas tunnel network. And this, of course, is where many people from many of the Hamas terrorists are. And the Israelis believe this vast underground tunnel network also includes many of the hostages, the 240 people stolen from Israel on October the 7th. The IDF experts detonated the tunnel in question as we were there, and I managed to get my cameraman to record the detonation. And we had to hide behind a wall because the explosion, the blast was very considerable. The ground, even some meters away beneath our feet.
I know we've got some footage.
Shook.
We've got some footage, Douglas, of that explosion. Again, it's how they have to try and clear the entrances to these tunnels because they can be booby-trapped. Let's try and have a little watch and a listen to that clip right now.
The Israelis are currently lowering dynamite into this tunnel. The aim is to blow up the tunnel and close it off from the rest of the network. So the Israelis are about to detonate the tunnel we just saw. If we're lucky, we're going to hear it somewhere. This is the first chance we've had to film. Anyone's had to film the actual humanitarian corridor that's opened up here, where the Israelis have asked the Palestinians in Gaza to move south. We can see the queue of people right behind me for the first time.
Douglas Murray, looking at that footage, I mean, what I think strikes most of us, I think, is just the absolute devastation in Gaza. I mean, it looks like something out of a Hollywood film, a sort of post-apocalyptic scene, and then you see these people queuing up. Tell us what was happening there.
So we got the first footage of the humanitarian corridor that the Israelis have opened. The Israelis have asked the citizens of Gaza, have told them that they should, if they are not Hamas, to move from the north to the south of Gaza. They are trying to make sure that the military fight, which is happening door to door, building by building, is only IDF versus Hamas. Now, of course, that means that a lot of civilians have to move. They are moving. You can see them moving there, and we got the first footage of that happening. Of course, it's a tide of human misery, it goes without saying, although it's a tide of human misery caused by Hamas starting this war on the 7th of October. But yes, we were there and able to watch as the IDF, the Israelis, instructed the locals in how to do this in the most peaceful and easy manner. There were calls out in Arabic and in Hebrew, interestingly enough. The calls in Arabic to the people, and by the way, I should tell about the size of the people we're talking about. 25,000 people the day before I was there passed the way we're seeing, 50,000 people the day before. So the Gazans are following the IDF's recommendations in moving. And of course, to move away from the most intense fighting. Even in this area, of course, it's very dangerous. Hamas have been shooting and rocketing civilians as they retreat because Hamas wants civilians to remain in the north in order to make the house-to-house fighting as difficult as possible for the Israelis. But it's also, of course, a very dangerous exercise for the IDF because they don't know who's coming through, and they have to try to make sure that the people coming through are A, not Hamas fighters, let alone leaders, and B, are not Israeli hostages being brought further south into Gaza, and therefore away from the Israelis who are trying to find them. The recommendations come out, the call goes out across the speakers. All the time, you can hear in the background, both shelling in the north from the IDF planes, but also routine firefights, anti-tank firings by Hamas and tanks firing from the IDF, and also a lot of machine gun fire going on all the time in the background in exchanges between the IDF and Hamas. But the main thing that is broadcast out to the Palestinians in the queues is, first of all, in Arabic, you understand what's happening. Please raise your hands. You understand, you're coming through peacefully. This is going to all be done peacefully and as easily as possible. And they go through the checkpoint. Some small number of people, mainly young men, are pulled out for a secondary inspection. These, of course, are the people of the age who are most likely to be Hamas fighters. They are questioned. They're checked that they don't have guns or other munitions on them. Obviously, the Israelis, among other things, also checking for suicide bombers or anyone else in the line like that. But a second thing and a detail that's important is very occasionally a call goes out across the megaphones from the Israelis in Hebrew. And I got one of the soldiers with me to translate what this said. And this said, among other things, if you are a child and you understand what is being said, jump now. And this is because the Israelis believe that Hamas may be using this corridor to smuggle some of the 40 stolen Israeli children south, further into Gaza. And this was a particularly sort of heartbreaking moment, because the idea that a young Israeli child being held by Hamas might be given this warning, this sign of hope, and be able to escape at that moment at the checkpoint is a searing idea. So far, sadly, the IDF has not been able to catch any of the to get back any of the children who Hamas stole last month.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk to you a little bit later in this half hour about your experiences talking to the families of those who've lost loved ones and hostages taken and the like. But watching this footage and reading your account in it, and also hearing what you're saying now, you're in a war zone, but we also have the fog of war, and everything that we hear and see, we have to go through the sort of prism of who has said it and why have they said it? So if the Hamas, the Gaza Health Ministry says something, that's gone via Hamas. If there's information about, children dying, that's come via Hamas. But also, we can't necessarily trust everything that we hear from the Israeli Defense Forces. There is, war propaganda, sort of thing that the British government would have done in our time, and we've done in more recent wars as well. How can we trust everything that we are hearing? You've been on the ground. How can you trust what's being said?
Well, personally, I trust everything I see, not everything I hear.
Yeah.
The Al-Shifa hospital was about a kilometre up the road from where I was yesterday. I was trying to get into it, and it didn't prove possible because a sort of major firefight ended up happening whilst I was there. The Al-Shifa hospital, of course, the IDF has actually managed to get into and did release images yesterday. Now, this is an incredibly contested issue, but you don't actually need the account of the Israelis that the hospital in question is one of the headquarters of Hamas and is used by them as a armaments dump as well as a headquarters. The IDF released footage yesterday from inside the hospital showing the munitions that were being kept inside the hospital when they were inside the hospital yesterday. And remember, the Israelis know quite a lot about the hospital because they built the hospital some 30 years ago. But the more interesting thing about the Shifa hospital in a way is the BBC and other media have been pretending in recent days that it's outrageous that the Israelis are saying it's a Hamas base. This has been recognized as a Hamas base by multiple international NGOs and other institutions for years. In 2014, Amnesty International, which is no friend of Israel, released a report where they said that the Al-Shifa hospital was not just a Hamas headquarters, but a headquarters in which Hamas used as an arms dump, as a prison for Palestinians who they were interrogating, and as a torture cell, which Hamas uses to torture and interrogate people from rival Palestinian factions. So if this was known in 2014 and Amnesty said it in 2014, I can't understand why there is so much international surprise. Yeah. And also, what is it that they think Hamas is not capable of? They think Hamas is not capable of using Palestinians as human shields? Yeah. They think Hamas is not capable of putting bombs underneath civilians?
Yeah, exactly. It is extraordinary, isn't it? Some of the international coverage. Well, I want to talk to you more about that. I want to talk to you about your experience talking to those who've lost loved ones in the kibbutz. And that's going to be coming up next. Also, I want to talk to you about that ceasefire vote in the UK Parliament as well. That's all coming up after the break